What is up, my friends? Welcome to the Trade Deadline special episode of Flippin' Bats. Take a bow, the trade deadline, one of the greatest MLB trade deadlines that we have ever seen. The names that were moved, the moves that were made. I can't believe what the last 2, 3 hours, really the last 24 hours has looked like around the game of baseball. We're going to talk about the big storylines out there. I'm going to do top three winners and top three losers of the trade deadline. We're going to talk about the biggest things. Carlos Correa is heading back to the Houston Astros in a big crazy deal that happened down the stretch here. But really, the big thing here today is there were a lot of winners and there were a lot of losers, and we're going to talk about the top three of each of them. And I'm going to get passionate about this because it has been a crazy last few hours. But we're going to start with Carlos Correa heading back to Houston. Big deal. Here's what happened. A couple weeks ago, Isaac Paredes goes down with his hamstring injury. It said it's worse than before. It looks like he's going to miss a lot of time. Well, it just came out that it looks like he's going to miss the rest of the year. Looks like he's going to have to get surgery on that. So the Astros all of a sudden go out and start looking around for a third baseman. Well, it all of a sudden starts coming out yesterday that Carlos Correa, previously of the Houston Astros, is a name they're looking into. And then we all wake up today and it's that fell apart. The Astros aren't really close with Carlos Correa. That's not happening. And then all of a sudden steam picks up, and next thing you know, Carlos Correa is heading back to the Houston Astros. He had a full no trade clause. He said to the Minnesota Twins, there's only one team that I would waive my no trade clause to, and that's to go back and play with the Houston Astros. His quote, Carlos Correa said, I'm coming home, and there's only one goal in mind, and that is to win championships. So, yes, the Astros have all-star shortstop Jeremy Pena already playing there at shortstop. Carlos Correa is going to be moving over to third base to play there. So Jeremy Pena will stay at shortstop. Isaac Paredes will play third base. And whenever Isaac Paredes comes back next year, you just figure it out from there. Who goes to the outfield? Who does what? Who knows? But in the here and now, the Houston Astros are trying to win a World Series. And the American League, this is going to be a theme of this show today. The American League is wide open. The Houston Astros made the moves that can put them in the driver's seat to be one of those teams to go win the American League. Absolutely. Carlos Correa's contract was massive. The financial details weren't known yet what that was going to look like. Well, it did come out that the Twins are paying $33 million of Correa's remaining $103.42 million. So essentially, the Houston Astros got back Carlos Correa, a 30-year-old Carlos Correa, for a $3.5 million deal. That is pretty good, if you ask me. And he's moving over to third base. He did say he feels like it's the right time in his career to move to third base. The Twins were sort of waiting for a shortstop to come up and push him over. Well, now this is the perfect excuse. And now you have Jeremy Pena and Carlos Correa going to play on the same side of the infield for the Houston Astros. It wasn't all that long ago. Correa was out the door, and everybody's up in arms, and Jeremy Pena was the one they believed in and pushed him out, and everybody's saying, oh, he's the replacement. Well, now they're going to be on the same side of the infield at shortstop and third base, Jeremy Pena and Carlos Correa. The Astros also added Jesus Sanchez, a big left-handed bat. I actually really like the pickup for them of Jesus Sanchez. The Astros have by far the least amount of at-bats all season long for left-handed hitters in their lineup. They've had 502 at-bats from left-handed hitters this year. That is dead last by almost 400 ABs. The next closest is the Angels at 895. And after that, everyone else is well in the 1000s with left-handed bats. So they needed a left-handed hitter. Jordan's going to come back, hopefully sooner than later. But you add Jesus Sanchez, who is going to play. Dana Brown said he's going to play mostly left field. little bit of right field when Cam Smith needs a day off. Jose Altuve is going to mostly go back to playing second base, and Jordan will be DHing when Jordan is able to come back. So I really like what the Houston Astros did. I think they went from a couple hours out being losers of the trade deadline to, with a couple hours left, becoming winners of the trade deadline. They didn't end up getting the arm they wanted and needed. They were in talks deep into the trade deadline with Dylan Cease and getting him from the Padres, but it didn't end up happening. Reports said that the Padres were wanting Spencer Arrighetti in the deal, plus three other players. They didn't end up figuring it out. Dylan Cease stays with the Padres, and they didn't end up it didn't end up getting their pitcher at all, which you do have some guys coming back and coming back off the IL, which will be huge for them, but they would have obviously liked a pitcher. But they get their bat, they get their third baseman, and they get a lefty bat for the outfield, which will be huge for them. So I think the Astros did well at the trade deadline. I will not, however, have them in my top three winners of the trade deadline. They were right on the verge of it. But let's talk top three winners. Let's start at number three. I'm going to go with the Seattle Mariners. Can we all, just as baseball fans, for a second, appreciate what the Seattle Mariners did? For years and years, everyone has just been barking up a tree at them saying, just go get offense. You have one of the best pitching staffs in all of baseball, a nasty bullpen. You just need offense. The offense just isn't good enough. Well, they went out and they needed to address their corner infield. They went out and a week ago got Josh Naylor, big first baseman, huge move for them. And then you kind of sit back and think, okay, the Mariners added some offense. I doubt they do anything more because we're not even used to them doing this. Well, last second, they come in and add arguably the biggest bat available at the trade deadline in Eugenio Suarez and get him for third base. So in the span of a week, they add Josh Naylor and Eugenio Suarez at the corners. And can we just take a second to appreciate the Mariners for finally doing what they've needed to do for years and years, really just doing what they never do, and it's add offense. They needed to get it done. They needed some thump in the middle of their lineup, and Eugenio Suarez is certainly capable of doing that. Josh Naylor has already hit his first home run with the Seattle Mariners, so I think they very clearly in the American League set themselves up to go out and be a team to win it. The American League is wide open. So if you're a team that had aspirations of winning the American League and actually went out and made some moves, you're sitting in a really good place. And I think the Mariners are. With that pitching staff, you do not want to face them in October with that pitching staff and that back end of the bullpen. And now you just add some serviceable offense, a couple guys that will run into baseballs. Josh Naylor can hit for a high average. Eugenio Suarez ain't going to hit you 300, but he might hit you 40, 50 homers, and he's going to hit a bunch of homers for the Seattle Mariners. Again, he was there a couple years ago, and now he's back. But the Mariners needed some thump in their lineup, and they went and got it done. And I think they deserve a ton of credit for that, and absolutely should be mentioned in the American League as one of the few teams that is capable of coming out and winning the American League and going to the World Series. They're number three for me. The number two winner from the trade deadline is the New York Mets. The Mets had some bullpen issues. And what did they do? They went out and added Gregory Soto, Tyler Rogers, and Ryan Helsley to now pair at the back end of the bullpen with Edwin Diaz back there. So really shortened the game massively. Their bullpen was outside of the top 10 in ERA. It was kind of middle of the pack. But they went and they've needed arms lately. They've been running out of arms to come in out of the bullpen. And you go and now make yourself arguably it is one of the best bullpens in baseball. For 24 hours, it was arguably the best bullpen in the game of baseball, but they're not anymore. Now you have a top three bullpen in the game of baseball for sure with those guys. I do want to talk about Tyler Rogers for a second with the Mets because I think he's going to be one of the more underrated moves that they made just because of his name. He's not a closer. He doesn't have the saves to his name. Tyler Rogers is one of the most underrated pitchers, relief pitchers in all of baseball. He is Mr. Consistent, and come playoff time, he's the guy I want on the mound. He does not walk anybody. In 50 innings this year, he's got 4 walks. He has a 1.80 ERA. He has a whip well under 1. He's the staple of consistency. He will and can pitch every single day. What Tyler Rogers brings to either that seventh or eighth inning or wherever they decide to put him will just be consistency, which is something the Mets desperately needed. So they needed bullpen help, and they went out and addressed that in the biggest way you possibly can. And then on the final day, just a couple of hours ago, they say, you know what? We need a center fielder. We're in on Luis Robert. We're in on Cedric Mullins. Well, they end up landing Cedric Mullins to address their center field needs. Cedric Mullins has been really good over the last month for the Baltimore Orioles, plays a really good center field, made one of the best catches you'll ever see in center field yesterday, if you're listening on Thursday. Been killing it for the Baltimore Orioles lately. And so the Mets end up addressing their bullpen, addressing the center field needs, and now they go forward with one of the best bullpens in the game of baseball and a really good offense. I think the Mets deserve a ton of credit here. They really shortened the game. Really shortened the game. You need 5-6 innings out of your starting pitchers, and then you can toss it over to a nasty bullpen. So the Mets are number 2 for me for trade deadline winners. And number 1. The number 1 trade deadline winner this year is the San Diego Padres. The San Diego Padres added Mason Miller, J.P. Sears, Nestor Cortez, Ryan O'Hearn, All-Star, Ramon Laureano, Freddie Fermin behind the plate, Will Wagner, utility guy. They got everything they needed, everything they wanted on their list, which is 2 everyday offensive bats, a bench upgrade, a catcher, 2 lefty starters, and one of the nastiest relievers in all of baseball. And they went out and accomplished every single one of those. The Padres make baseball fun. AJ Preller, the GM, makes baseball fun. Their whole philosophy is prospects are suspects until further notice. That's how the Padres operate. That's how they've been operating under AJ Preller, and it's incredible to watch. Just as a fan of baseball, it is incredible to watch. We're living in the here and now, and whatever happens, happens. I want to go get these players because I want to win this year, and I want to win over the next couple of years. And what does that look like? I don't know. His quote last year, he said, one thing we've never been scared of is we're going to trade players. We're going to trade players that show up in the big leagues. If we get what we're looking to do and it works out for us both this year and over the next 3 to 5 years, we're content with that. So look, say what you want about prospects and holding on to prospects, but this is objectively more fun to watch. The Padres are a good baseball team this year. What do they do at the trade deadline? They go all in because it's what AJ Preller does. He goes all in all the time. James Wood, Mackenzie Gore, CJ Abrams, all good players, all good prospects. We want Juan Soto. So we're going to go get Juan Soto. And it's not like getting rid of these prospects just ends the prospects in your organization. AJ Preller is incredible at identifying talent and getting that in the organization. You can do that through the draft. You can do that through the international signing pool. You can do that through other trades. So I just think a lot of teams out there are overvaluing prospects and what they bring to the organization. For every example of James Wood, Fernando Tatis, Yordan Alvarez, there are hundreds of examples of prospects not turning into anything. You know, the Tigers traded one of the best pitchers of all time. The Tigers traded my brother in 2017 for Franklin Perez, the prize get for the Tigers, Daz Cameron, and Jake Rogers. Franklin Perez was terrible in the minor leagues, never made it. Daz Cameron has not become the player that I think the Tigers wanted. Jake Rogers is okay behind the dish, but is that the deal you wanted? Is that the trade you were making? Franklin Perez was the prize get in the trade for Justin Verlander. Justin went on to win 2 Cy Young Awards and 2 World Series with the Houston Astros. They might have thought at the time they gave up a lot, but those prospects, you never know what they're going to turn into. And I'm not saying be reckless, but I'm saying I think a lot of teams overvalue those prospects and what they mean or what they might turn into. I look at the Dodgers. The Dodgers aren't afraid to ship out prospects. The Dodgers' number 1 prospect in 2022 and 2023, Diego Cartaya, the number 14 overall prospect in all of baseball, was traded earlier this year, and he just got released. If you're a good competitive team, go get the player you want. Of course, prospects can turn into something, but they also might not. And if you're able to win in the here and now, go do that. Go get that done. You obviously can replenish an organization every single year. And I'm not saying that, James Wood is going to hurt the Padres, right? But you ended up with Juan Soto for a year. And it didn't work out. You didn't win the World Series, but you flipped him into Michael King. And now you flipped that into another team that might win the World Series this year. And then you went and got you went and used more of your prospects to get more players that can win this year. You know, that's what I think about when I watch AJ Preller and what he does with the San Diego Padres. He's all in every year, and it's all you can ask for as a fan of the game of baseball. As a fan of the game and not a fan of the Padres per se, I'm a fan of what AJ Preller does for his organization. And I'd much rather that than hoarding these prospects for forever and forever. And then if they're finally good enough to come up, they come up to the big leagues and then you don't extend them and then they're out the door anyway. I'm looking at you, Pittsburgh Pirates. There's multiple teams that I can speak to about this. But I would much rather what the San Diego Padres are doing. Take your prospects, flip them into real all-star players and try and go win a World Series. And if you don't win, try again next year and be aggressive at the trade deadline. I absolutely love it. I love what the San Diego Padres did this year. And they, in my opinion, are the number one winner from the trade deadline. So my three winners: Seattle Mariners at number 3, New York Mets at number 2, and the San Diego Padres at number 1. For there to be winners, there's going to be losers. At the trade deadline, you're either a buyer or you're a seller. And if you're not, well, you're doing something wrong and you need to figure that out within your organization. But you got to buy or you got to sell. Just stay off the fence. That's where you don't want to be. The teams on the fence are nightmares. You got to figure out what side to go on and commit. Let's talk about the top 3 losers of the 2025 trade deadline. And we're going to start at number 3 with the Toronto Blue Jays. The Toronto Blue Jays just took over the AL East a couple weeks ago, and they just took over the best record in the American League to this point. And what did they need? They needed a starting pitcher. They needed something to pair with Jose Barrios, Kevin Gausman, and Chris Bassett, who's just eaten up some innings, over a 4 ERA this year. Been a serviceable pitcher, but you needed another starter to go forward with in the playoffs and for the rest of the year because the AL East is a good division. Well, they just didn't do that, in my opinion. They added Shane Bieber, who is a pitcher that hasn't thrown a single pitch in Major League Baseball this year. And I get he's a Cy Young Award winner. I get that he's almost back. He's been on his rehab assignment. He's close to returning to the big leagues. But is that the big splash to prove to your team that we're all in and we believe in what you've done and let's go to the playoffs and let's get to the World Series? I don't think it is. The Toronto Blue Jays needed to do more. Of course, they could add a slugging outfielder and add some more depth. But to me, they needed a top-tier, front-of-the-line starter. And I don't mean, look, like one of the guys that was arguably available in a Sandy Alcantara or a Zach Gallen or a Dylan Cease or even go get a Merrill Kelly, one of the big pitching arms that was available. And a lot of those guys didn't end up getting traded. But you didn't get that done, and you went and added a pitcher that you don't know what you're going to get. And I'm not saying it's going to be a bad move, but what I am saying is you had the opportunity right in front of you as the best team, the best record in the American League, leading the AL East, to make that even more prominent and to be a team that would be the favorite to come out of the American League. The weak American League, but I don't think they did enough. I'm a little disappointed in what they did at the trade deadline. And with the team that they had, the record that they have, their division standings, I put them as a loser at the trade deadline. They're at number 3 for me. And number 2 loser at the 2025 trade deadline, I'm going with the Boston Red Sox. What did you do? At the buzzer, you got Dustin May. That doesn't do much for me. I'm a little underwhelmed with the Boston Red Sox, who were seemingly all in this year. You add Alex Bregman in the offseason, you add Garrett Crochet in the offseason, you traded away Rafael Devers and told the whole fan base, wait a second, this is not us giving up on the season. We are still very much in. And apparently, by all accounts, the Boston Red Sox were the team most in on All-Star starter Joe Ryan, and they just weren't able to push that across the finish line. For whatever reason, they just weren't able to go that step further and get Joe Ryan in the rotation. And I just don't think they did enough. I think their trade deadline was a failure. I think they kind of stood pat, and at the last second, we're like, oh, we need to do something. Let's get Dustin May, which to me doesn't scream a guy that's going to be a stud starter in the postseason. Again, he's got nasty stuff, some of the nastiest stuff in baseball. But is he a guy that you're going to want to turn to in game 2 or 3 of a postseason? I don't know if he's that guy. So underwhelming. They needed a starter. They needed a 2-3 starter in the rotation to pair with Garrett Crochet, and they didn't do it. They had Joe Ryan right there at the edge. I think it was close, and they didn't get it done. Really underwhelming trade deadline for the Boston Red Sox. And number one, this one's clear and obvious. I think every single one of you listen, and if you ask who's the biggest loser of the trade deadline, the answer needs to be the Chicago Cubs. When Justin Steele got injured and got Tommy John and went down early in the year, it was at the time, okay, you know you're going to need a starter. Just go address it now. Why wait until the trade deadline to go get your starting pitcher? Why not just do it now when you know you need it? They didn't. They didn't do that. They waited too long, in my opinion. And then you got here at the trade deadline and it was, okay, what pitcher are the Cubs going to get? Which starting pitcher available are the Chicago Cubs going to land? And that answer was nobody. I can't fathom that. I can't fathom how the Chicago Cubs didn't end up with a stud starting pitcher. How they didn't do enough this year with the roster that they have, with Kyle Tucker in the outfield for 1 year. You have 1 year of Kyle Tucker, unless you re-sign him. With what PCA is doing this year, with what Michael Busch is doing this year, with what Matthew Boyd is doing on the mound as an all-star, with Shota Imanaga, with Nico Horner having a good year. With this roster, you don't add a starting pitcher? I can't fathom it. It's idiotic, is what it is. It is a massive failure of a trade deadline. Without question, the Chicago Cubs are the biggest loser of the 2025 trade deadline because they had every bit the roster to win the World Series if you can go out and add a piece that you needed, which was a dominant starting pitcher. They were in the conversation. If you add that piece, they were in the conversation to beat the Dodgers in the playoffs, to beat the Phillies in the playoffs, to beat the Mets in the playoffs. They every bit could have done that. If you go in the playoffs with Shota Imanaga, another stud that they didn't get, and then all-star Matthew Boyd, who's totally changed his career around, and some other pitchers that they have that are having a good year as well. They just didn't do what needed to get done. Easily, the biggest loser of the trade deadline is the Chicago Cubs. So my biggest losers at number 3, the Toronto Blue Jays. At number 2, the Boston Red Sox. And at number 1, the Chicago Cubs, the biggest loser. When it comes to losers, I did want to mention, if there's an honorable mention of losers, I do want to mention the Detroit Tigers, a team that you all know I root for, a team that you all know I want to do well. I played in the organization for a long, long time. I will forever root for the Tigers. They didn't do enough. They didn't. If you think the Detroit Tigers had a good trade deadline, stop kidding yourself. The Detroit Tigers are a World Series caliber team that are just missing a couple of pieces, and they didn't add those pieces. They didn't. Sure, Kyle Finnegan in the bullpen, that'll be a big piece for them. But Chris Paddock, Charlie Morton at the buzzer, That's not moving the needle for me. This is a team that is every bit ready to win the World Series. And at the trade deadline, you're adding Charlie Morton, Chris Paddock, Paul Sewald. What are we doing? You're a World Series team. Go out there and add one of the bats that's needed and go out and add a stud starting pitcher. I these are not the trade pieces that tell me that the front office is fully all in on this roster. To me, the Tigers trade deadline says that the front office doesn't think this is a World Series caliber team. They didn't make the moves that say, we're a World Series team. We're getting it done. They didn't. You know what would have said that to me? Eugenio Suarez at third base. You lost out on that. Any of the third basemen. Bring me any third baseman to the offense. Bring me any bat to add some depth to that offense. And I know people can say, well, the Tigers offense this year is top 5 in runs scored. How can you say this? I've been saying it all year. I don't think that the Tigers offense, as is 1 through 9, is good enough to win the World Series. That's why I said every day of the offseason they needed to add Alex Bregman. That's why when the Tigers were the best team in the American League and some people were coming at me saying, do you still think they needed to sign Alex Bregman now? Look where their offense is. That answer's always been yes. Spare me the stats. It's the eye test. I know there's plenty of guys that can step up and be valuable pieces and that the offense is very underrated in the eyes of most. And that I will agree with. Most people don't realize how much Kerry Carpenter rakes against righties, or Matt Vierling, or Zach McKinstry. There's a lot of names in the lineup that I think can be good players that most people don't know about. Riley Green is a stud. Sure. Javi Baez, a resurgence offensively. This offense has always been missing a piece. And I don't care if at the end of the year, they're still a top 5 offense in runs scored. For the playoffs, to win the World Series, I think the Detroit Tigers needed to add another bat. And they didn't get it done. And I don't think they added the starting pitching that they need to. I think Chris Paddock and Charlie Morton are good pieces to add for the second half of the year where you need to get outs from your starting pitcher. I'm not convinced that either of those guys are the stud that they need on the mound in the playoffs, game 2, game 3 of the ALCS. I don't think Charlie Morton or Chris Paddock is that guy. Finnegan in the bullpen, I like. But I think you're kidding yourself if you're trying to convince yourself that Scott Harris had himself a good trade deadline for the Detroit Tigers. I just don't think that's the case. I think they're losers of the trade deadline just because of the team they had. This feels like a similar trade deadline that they've had the past few years, the past year when it's like, okay, we're a pretty good team. Maybe we can do something. No, you're not a pretty good team. You're a World Series caliber American League team in a league that is weak, and you can absolutely get to the World Series. And you didn't do enough. You made the little rinky-dink moves that I don't think are enough to make you a World Series team. They're going to help, sure, but they're not the big ones that needed to get made. And that's my frustration with the Detroit Tigers and the trade deadline that they had. They just really, what I was talking about earlier with prospects, with the Padres, they're the contrast of that. They're a team that I think overvalues prospects. We don't know what they're going to turn into, right? Like, let's use some of that. Windows don't last forever. I have John Smoltz on this show every single week, and he always says, if there's a window to win, go for it. It's not reckless, but like if you truly believe you're within that window, sometimes it didn't open for 10 years. The Baltimore Orioles look like their window was open for a decade. They're terrible this year. If the window's open, go for it. And it feels like the Tigers at times overvalue some of the prospects that they have in the organization instead of flipping them around to go get a player to help the team in the here and the now. That's the Detroit Tigers. The trade deadline was insane. I tweeted this, MLB Trade Deadline, take a bow. Absolutely incredible. Great trade deadline. So many players were moved. Listen to these names. I'm going to go through them just so everybody knows the new teams, the new players, where they're going, all that. Yohan Duran, to the Phillies. I have all the names written. Let's see if I know in the moment can name the team with them. Ryan Helsley to the Mets. Eugenio Suarez to the Mariners. Josh Naylor to the Mariners. Shane Bieber to the Blue Jays. Cabrian Hayes to the Reds. Tyler Rogers to the Mets. Carlos Correa to the Astros. Cedric Mullins to the Mets. Jesus Sanchez to the Astros. Merrill Kelly to the Rangers. Harrison Bader to the Phillies. Willie Castro to the Cubs. David Bednar to the Yankees. Kyle Finnegan to the Tigers. Bailey Falter to the Royals. Dustin May to the Red Sox. Jose Caballero to the Yankees. They got a shortstop. Jose Caballero to the Yankees. Camilo Duvall to the Yankees right at the buzzer, and Charlie Morton to the Tigers. There were more names out there and moved. Those are some of the bigger ones and the new teams that they're on and what you can expect. There were more names than that. That is a lot. The trade deadline was awesome, and I absolutely love it. If you got the players and you got the prospects, go get the player you want. And you know what it does? It just makes things more exciting in the here and now for those good teams, and it gives some other teams that aren't good, really good players, potentially for the future to really retool their organization. The problem comes when you get teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates, who, by the way, what were you even doing at this trade deadline? You literally signed Tommy Pham and Andrew Heaney just to flip them around for something at the trade deadline, and you just didn't. What's the point? It's like you forgot the trade deadline was today. I can't even fathom that. But also the prospects within the organization. You just hoard them, and then if they come up and they're any good, you just trade them away so you don't have to pay them. That's the problem. That is the problem with any team in baseball, is that in a nutshell. The Pittsburgh Pirates are the problem. But you got your prospects and you're a good team, flip them into something. Or go get your prospects to retool the organization. I love it. I love the trade deadline. It's honestly my favorite day of the regular season. I absolutely love July 31st, the trade deadline. Thank you all for listening and watching, and I hope you enjoyed the trade deadline as much as I did. Please make sure you're subscribed to the Flippin' Bats YouTube channel. You can watch every single episode we do on our YouTube channel. Leave a comment, like the video. That all really helps. And I always hop in the comments. If you have a question for me, leave it in the comments. I'll answer. If you just want to leave a comment, I will always respond to most of the comments and really enjoy hopping in there and talking to you guys. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever. Hit that subscribe, follow button. That really helps as well. And we're on all social media at Flippin' Bats Pod everywhere. The trade deadline has come and gone. This was a lot of fun. I am talking to John Smoltz tomorrow morning. We waited all week long to get his trade deadline opinions. I don't know if that's going to come out Friday evening or maybe back to a Saturday with Smoltz episode. We'll see, but be on the lookout for that. I am traveling on Friday to Bristol, Tennessee for the Speedway Classic. So if you don't follow me on social media, Ben Verlander everywhere, I'll be there live on site, hopefully making you guys feel like you're there with me and being inside of the NASCAR track. And it's going to be the most attended regular season game in MLB history. And I will be there for that. I love you all. I love this community. 2025, the year of Flippin' Bats, my friend. What a trade deadline. Thank you all for watching, for listening. And until next time, remember, find your bat and flip it. Peace.